Well, hello everyone. I would like to welcome Gitanjali, the director of the lovely animated film Bombay Rose, which will be launching via Netflix. I'll let Gitanjali tell us the date, but that'll be coming up very soon. And so ASIFA-Hollywood welcomes Gitanjali.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Sue. And yes, I'm more than happy to talk about Bombay Rose. It's releasing on the 4th of December. And yes, we are all very excited, a big team of 150 people waiting for it to go on screen and see and hear what people have to say.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I've watched this film and I was really impressed. It's beautiful. It's very deep, and I think ASIFA-Hollywood members are going to really enjoy it. I would love you to tell us more about the story. Explain the story, give us an overview of it, and so it'll help as we go into our discussion, frame it.
More than just telling you about the story of the film, which is, of course, a love story between two young people living on the streets of India, and through them touching different love stories which are not conventional. But what started me, I mean, the point of view that I have in the entire film is actually like, if you lived in a big city like Bombay and were traveling through Bombay, getting stuck in a traffic jam, if you were sitting in a taxi cab or rickshaw, which is completely open, the kind of world you see around you, and in a place like Bombay, life spills out of people's houses into the streets. And that was what I wanted to capture in the entire film, of you being not a bystander, but somebody who's stuck in the middle of a city and getting to see the life of people who live on the streets, who just don't sell things or have shops, but actually live on the streets, fall in love, fall out of love, have fights, start families. And the entire film is from this point of view of seeing life up close. It's seeming into you, and try to make a film which is not about the poverty of the slums, of people who live in the slums in India, but to be a part of it, to see its richness. And I think the story is told in I wanted to tell the story in a way where they might be poor, the characters, but their imagination and their fantasies and their dreams are very, very rich. And this is how I balance the two things. And that is a tragedy of the film also, what you wish for and what you hope for and what your reality is.
Very interesting. Yes, it was very rich as I was watching the film, and I seen the many stories being told. Why don't we begin with your story? I would love to know about you, how you got your start in animation or in filmmaking. Maybe you can tell us about your background.
Okay, so everything I've ever done in life has been very unconventional, and to the extent of it being boring. In the sense, I have not studied animation, I have not studied filmmaking, and yet I do animation filmmaking. I studied art, and right after art school, I wanted to study film, but financially I couldn't afford to study. I had to start working. This is back in the 90s when we were not such a rich, successful country. So all of us would have a basic education and then get on to jobs. And I chose to work, I had studied advertising, but I chose to work in an animation studio. And this studio used to teach newcomers animation. So I stayed there for 2 years. I learned conventional animation with Mr. Ram Mohan. He's one of the pioneers of animation in India. And 2 years working on the job, there were a bunch of us who learned and worked on the job. And then they continued doing conventional animation. I got interested in more personal author-driven animation simply by watching animation which was happening in places like the National Film Board of Canada and all over Europe. Back in the 90s, there was one person in the studio who used to send us films, video cassettes from National Film Board of Canada. And that kind of opened my eyes onto the kind of animation people do in the world, the kind of self-expression that is what animation lends to. And slowly I started working almost alone on my own style of animation by making films in my spare time in the studios that I was working in. And film after film after film, I kind of got my art And because I was making those films myself, I had to animate the film. I had to write the story, edit and animate, composite the film, even get into sound and music as much as I could. So what happened is eventually I kind of learned each and every part of animation filmmaking. And because I learned it on the job and I learned it in an advertising studios, I had to be very good at it in a very short time. So this kind of helped my expertise. And later on, when I started making films, I had the supreme confidence that I can do whatever I want, even by myself, even if I don't have a team. So Bombay Rose was only the second film in my life that I worked with a team, and a team as big as 20 people to begin with. And we ended with about 80 people. It was a huge team for me, but it was a team which was curated in a way that could take a single person's style and vision into a feature film. So that was a different learning experience, how to get my style or what I have been doing over the years from a bunch of people. And I think we succeeded that in Bombay Rose in a way that some of the artists did work, which is something I could never have done by myself as an individual. So we were scared that the teamwork would take away from or dilute my form, but it ended up with them kind of enhancing the form, which is what, when you say richness, it's come from all the contributions of the various people where they had the patience and the talent to take it to the level of expertise, which they have ended up doing. But it was a complete experiment. We had no clue at the beginning of 2 years where we are going to reach with this team and with this film.
Well, I saw that in your bio that you had produced an animated short in the past, Painted Rainbow, which won a number of awards. So you already came into this as an award-winning director and developing, would you say this was continuing developing your own style and your creative voice?
Yes, Printed Rainbow was a surprise for me because I didn't expect it to do so well. It was in 2006 that I made the film, and yes, it went everywhere. For me, it was just, if it is selected in Annecy, I'm happy, and then it was selected in Cannes, and it won the awards, and it went everywhere. So I was not expecting it, but again, as I said, a person who works by herself or himself and is not from an institute, a film and its acceptance internationally kind of gave me the confidence that yes, I can make short films. And after that, a few years after that, I felt comfortable with the format of a feature film because that's really very different from a short. So the success of Printed Rainbow was not really financial success, but the success of it going to many festivals, winning awards. It was also shortlisted for the Oscars, and it was disqualified because of a technical reason. It gave me the confidence that yes, the kind of films that that I'm making is speaking to audiences all over the world, to people of different ages. And I traveled a lot with the film, and I got responses. I met other filmmakers. So the exposure that the travel of the film gave me resulted into wanting to make a feature film.
Wonderful, wonderful. I understand that this story, the movie itself, is based on a true story. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
It's not a single true story. It's many true stories. It's like about these people and characters in newspapers or through friends or the service providers of your in your vicinity have stories like this to tell. So there were a bunch of real stories happening to people that I kind of brought together. Now, some of the facts are absolutely real. Like we had dance bars. These are places where women dance in clubs, but they're very safe and clean, and they're not into prostitution. It's a choice. So these are clubs where the women are not even stripping. They're just dancing to Bollywood songs, and they would make a commendable amount of money. And this was stopped suddenly by the government of the state that I live in overnight. That they were completely banned on the 15th of August 2005. So this really happened. And what was sad was when the government puts these, starts these laws, they don't take care of the repercussion after this. So some 80,000 women were pushed into prostitution because their livelihood stopped. So this was a fact which for me I wanted to deal with in a film, to question. It's been 10 years now, it's been 15 years now since that, and the bars have not opened. These women have become old and have had to resort to various desperate ways of living. So that is a fact that happened, and I put that into the film. Then there are other things like a Bollywood superstar through drunken driving, running over three people and killing them. This actually happened, but no case was, a case was registered against the superstar. Being a superstar, he was completely acquitted of. The court gave their thing. Nobody drove the car. The three people just came under a car and died. So it is very ridiculous. So these are the things which as facts, I bring back into the film, just for people to ponder over these facts. So they're based on true stories, but not using the real names or anything, because these are stories which happen across Bollywood stars, across the fans that they trample upon, across the people who, save up money to go and buy tickets for a film, and then they feel very defeated when something like this happens. So it's a number of true facts that come together in the film.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, you did a lovely job of weaving those different stories together. As I was watching, when we're watching characters, and then we're seeing the children, and then the grandparents, and the film flows beautifully from character to character and story setting. I was very impressed with that. You know what I was really found fascinating was the beautiful painterly look of the film. The backgrounds are beautifully painted, and then the style of the character animation that's so painterly. I would love it if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that it's weaving together, because that for me is very, very important in my storytelling. And this is where I love to tell people that, Indian or Oriental storytelling is so different from the Western concept of storytelling. Precisely because of this, we have a tradition of weaving tales together, many, many tales together in circles, and then they reach a point of a finite point. This also happens with the Thangka culture, paintings from Japan, from Tibet. Everything is in circles. And if you see Japanese storytelling, also Miyazaki storytelling, they are circles. They're not beginning, middle, end. They're circles within circles within circles, which then become comprehensive. And this weaving together, it's like exactly like in making a sari or a handloom woven fabric, which is also something that in India is very, very rich. We weave together patterns, and the patterns then become a bigger picture. So I have made this film also in that sense. These are patterns of love stories. And then it tells you a bigger picture of the city, which film doesn't really have a beginning, middle, and a normal animation convention of having a climax and a chase and things like that. It doesn't have that graph, but it has a more circular graph. And this is something I achieved through the graphic style. I have used three distinct graphic styles in the film. One is the miniature paintings. These are Mughal miniature paintings, which happened from the 15th, 16th century. They used to thrive in India. So there used to be these schools making these miniature paintings, which are really small. They're about 3 inches by 4 inches. Very, very small paintings made by single hair brushes. And they have a lot of details. So these Mughal miniatures, they were imported from Persia. People from Persia came to India. They brought this art, and India made this art, the people in India made this art very Indian by enthusing more colors in it, changing the forms to make it Indian. So again, I think it's a very beautiful blend between what the Muslims from Persia brought and what the Hindus from India took over and made a very beautiful artistic style. So yes, there is a politics in using this style also. So the girl, Kamla's dreams, are settled in the north of India in a place called Mandu in Madhya Pradesh. Now this place is very rich for miniature paintings. The whole northern belt of India has its history painted in miniature paintings. So if she's thinking back about the palaces that she roamed in and lived in her village, she would see them in the form of art that existed at that time. So I used a miniature painting art, which was which comes from her region. And when she gets into a dream space, I use, for reality, I use a certain style, which is simple and kind of clashing and full of traffic. And when she gets into the dream, I use the miniature style of paintings because it's beautiful. It gives us the silence. It creates a space. It gives a dreamlike quality. The same thing I do for the boy. He's from the northern region of India, which is Kashmir, which is almost like a Palestine for India, the way we have committed atrocities on Jammu and Kashmir, which is essentially a Muslim state, and the rest of India is Hindu. It is being cut off from the rest of India, and he comes from a place like that. And that place, Kashmir, his father being a truck driver, is very rich in this in the art of painting their trucks. They paint their trucks like houses, you know, they're full of motifs and all. And people in Pakistan also do this. And again, what is interesting is across the mountains, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kashmir, trade happens between all these places, and the trucks which drive through these countries look like this. So again, there's a politics of bringing in an art which is developed by intermingling of cultures to come into his life and to tell his stories. And the third style is of the old lady who used to work in Bollywood films back in the 1950s. Now, in the 1950s, Bollywood films looked a lot like Hollywood films. They were black and white. They were these sharply lit films. We were very influenced by the West. So we had this noir look in our films with Indian faces. So for the old woman who used to work in films in the 1950s, how I tell her story is that she's stuck in that time because those were beautiful times. Every time she steps out, this is the style, this black and white movie style is the style her life gets into.
Ah, fascinating. My goodness, there is a lot in this story. This is good. I'm so happy you're able to share this. So as people watch the film, having some of that understanding, or after they watch it, will be wonderful to have heard this from you to explain part of this. This is great.
Yeah, it's got a lot of layers, but what I feel is if you can understand some of the layers also, it works for you. You will understand a little more if you're closer to the culture, and you will probably understand a lot if you live in a place like Bombay. However, those layers are, it's okay for the rest of the audience not to really get those layers. If they get, great. But if they don't, the film still works.
Right, right. Well, as you've been describing this, I see that there are all these kind of there's a very strong social political subtext to the entire filmmaking and the story of the film. Has this film been released in India already? And if so, how was it received?
No, it has not been released in India. It was only, it did some festivals, and that was a year back. The festival response was amazing. We had 4 shows and all of them were houseful. And there were people queuing up for the tickets for like 3 hours before. But that's because we are very enthusiastic in festivals. But yes, a lot of people, and it happened in Bombay. So a lot of people had heard about the film and knew my work. So I had a lot of enthusiastic audience. But I have no clue how it's going to work in the box office, because in India, we are not used to seeing animation films from anywhere except Disney or Pixar. English language animation films. We do not even get to watch Japanese Miyazaki films in theaters. Never. Neither have Indian animation films been in theaters much. So I have no idea how it would be received. But yesterday, after the trailer was put up by Netflix, we got a very enthusiastic response to the trailer. I think about 80 or 90,000 views within a day for the Indian one. But there was a huge discussion where people have intolerant people are talking this film is about Hindu-Muslim love and it should be banned and it should be. So I think slight trouble is brewing up, because just by the trailer, what they can see is this is a love story between a Muslim boy and a Hindu girl. And right now in India, it's a boiling topic. People have been killed and lynched, Muslim people, for falling in love with Hindu girls. So there's a lot of tension. which is strange because it was not so bad when I started making the film, and 6 years later, after I finished making the film, it's become an issue because we have a very right-wing government which is raking it up. So I think this film, which is otherwise non-problematic, could get into trouble. I don't know. It's weird, you know, the times right now. So you can't say how it is going to be received by the audience.
Well, isn't that fascinating? From when you start making a film to when it's finished, how the world can change so
Has
much.
gone back. Yeah, the world seems to have gone backwards. No, changed is nice, but change for the worse for
The worst. That's terrible. I'm curious, how did the Netflix connection come about? Was it from being at your reputation and from your film festivals, or just when you screened the film?
No, I think it was totally my producer, Deborah Sate, who managed she was in, I mean, she knew everybody from Netflix. So my job was just doing film, and Deborah, who's from Sinistan, we were working for 2.5 years on the film. So it gave us a long time to make deals. It's a French, British, Indian co-production. The British and Indian company is one and the same. So since they worked out from London, and they were doing all the festivals all over the world, even curating and taking on films.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of spread the word about the film, and there was an interest, yes, in my film because I was doing a bunch of script labs and production labs, and it kept getting selected in international project markets. So that is the way I kept the interest on till my producers came on board. Once my producers came on board, we started production and they kind of took it over. And yeah, Netflix deal, I think, happened only over last year after the film was made. And of course, that it premiered in Venice. It was the opening film in Venice Critics Week. Kind of got us the interest from Netflix, Amazon, and then they pursued it, and Netflix was our first choice.
Nice. So, you know, as you were talking about the background style and the very detailed, I actually have some Persian one-hair paintings. My mother used to be in Asia and in India a lot, and the detail. And I noticed that when they would go into dream sequences or certain sections, the paintings got very, very intricate, and then almost working like in layers, like animated, you know, a foreground and a middle ground and a background. And you could see the difference in the movement style that really helped set aside or accentuate where we've moved into more of a dream sequence or a flashback. You know, it felt like sometimes the character animation had a very painterly look and also had a very soft edges, especially the girl around the eyes. Was that a specific, was there a certain, like, was this done in harmony or a special software? Is it 2D? It felt very 2D, but sometimes it felt 3D as well, or more dimensional. So I'm curious some of the technology of the you know, the tools and the process.
Yeah, it's completely 2D animation, and it's totally done on Photoshop and Flash, and composited on After Effects. It's the technology is pretty simple, but how I broke down the style for the execution, the reality, the part which is on the streets in Bombay and they're present, that is dealt with we did a lot of calculations, and I came up with a style in which when the character is in close up, you can see the character's eyes, you can see a bit of definition. Suppose I want to show the character's definition, the face is defined. But if the character has to take a back seat and has to be standing away, you have a full figure. Then, as happens in a crowd, you can't really see their eyes, you can't really see their details. So we would paint the character depending on how far away they went from the character, from the camera. Without using soft focus, I kind of used a style in painting which imitates soft focus. You remove the details. And suppose the character is really far away in a crowd, you remove even more details. So you have just patches in which the character moves. So each character had 3 or 4 different ways of defining them depending on how far they are from the camera, depending on how important they are in the shot. So in that way, they would blend with the crowd when they wanted to blend with the crowd, and they could stand out as an individual whenever I wanted them to stand out. So it's really what you do with the real camera. You kind of pull focus into your character. We did it through painting. So many times, if the character is far away and she's looking down, you can't, her eyes are not defined. But as soon as she looks up and looks and sees her lover, her eyes open and shine. So I used painting in a way. Again, these are non-conventional rules. Painting in a way to show something that I wanted to show and to not show everything else that forms a clutter. And using the same logic, when they go into their dream, the air is clear, everything can be seen, everything is pure. It's almost like in a dream, sometimes it is more defined than it should be. And depending on the art styles that I used for the dream sequence, like if I use the Mughal miniature paintings, I use them as cutouts because that's the feel the painting gives. Now, the painting which I am inspired by is a still image. The movement is something that I create. So from still images, all these paintings which I have used as inspiration are still images. My creativity comes in where I can define it in movement in the form that I want. But I define it in such a way that it still looks like a miniature painting in the end. If I take a miniature painting and make it very 3D, three-dimensional, and give it a lot of lighting and shadows, it would destroy and take away from the miniature painting. So I would not do that. I would treat them as cutouts. But in the dream sequence of the old lady, where it is the black and white films, I will not use that as a cutout. I will give it the three-dimensionality and the light and the noir quality and some smoke and things. So with each style, I have actually gone berserk and broken a lot of rules, but felt very happy doing it. And, kept it convincingly within that world, explored every possible thing to keep it within that world, and then come out. And this is why I love using 3 or 4 styles in the film, even if the audience or my producers or a lot of people are skeptical, saying, the audience is going to get confused. And I feel it's like, sometimes when any of you go to an Indian restaurant to eat, you're going to be confused. There's going to be a lot of food. So you come in wanting to be confused, wanting to hog and have a bad stomach at the end of it. But let's do it like, how we do it. And let's see if people like it or not. So my take was this. I think people are far more experimental and accepting as an audience than we kind of give them the credit.
I think you're right about that. And I would say even in the last 2 or 3 years, so much television storytelling, even in some of the TV series, some of them on Netflix, they're jumping, they're in a story and then they jump into a flashback and then they're off almost into a parallel dimension sometimes. And I feel the viewers are getting much more familiar with those more creative techniques. So I thought it worked very nicely. It was clear and I could follow it. I loved when sometimes it went almost like you were looking through a camera lens and then everything went rose colored.
Yeah.
Pink, and then it was focusing on that. That was lovely. Lovely.
Yeah, I think that's something you can do in animation. You can't do otherwise. You watch something through love-tinted glasses. That was my definition for that. And yeah, I pushed animation, and even that sequence, at the storyboard level, everybody was the producers and everyone was very skeptical. I said, just let me do it. Just let me do it. Just let me finish it. And it was a tough one. And they all loved it, but they didn't know how I would pull it off. And I think in that sequence, especially, we have used some live action reference, which is why it looks so 3-dimensional, because we have this, this spherical lens and people walking and coming and cars and point of view. So for that, we happily and conveniently used a camera, shot things, came back and do it on the board using those references, which is why they look very realistic. For a lot of action scenes, we have taken live action reference. But again, something which I have done, which is very different from all other films, is none of the voice actors have acted out their parts, although they are all theater actors. But I did not use the acting of the cast at all. what I did was something which I do and I made my animators do, is act out every scene themselves. So act out every emotion themselves. So even if they were men or women, they would have to behave and feel like the characters and draw it. Sometimes I would help them act the characters, and they would draw watching me. Which is why the acting in the film is it does not look like any famous actor or any famous. They all have their own life. They all come out as theater characters. That's also because I've done a bit of theater and acting, and I bring that out in my films. So that is again very unique in the film. We do not have a single star look like a star or sounding like a star. Everybody comes from the street, remains and looks like they come from the street. Nondescript entities.
Right. You know, it's interesting you talk about that, the acting style, because I noticed that, and it did feel very theater in some regards, because sometimes in animation, characters can end up moving too much, or they get, you know, the movement gets busy. And especially as you have sometimes a number of characters on screen at one time, with creating the busy city feeling, that I noticed the style of the acting was the characters would go into a pose, or that they would, the pose they were in would help accentuate the emotion or what they were saying, and it really supported the storytelling, and it didn't conflict, or it didn't distract, and it was in some regards not limited, but they would move just as they needed to, and it didn't need to be overly done, and I thought that was very appealing.
I had to really, my animators, I had to wean them out of this anticipation, action, and then the follow through, because they have all learned that. And I also appreciate that, but I wanted it out from the style completely. So I tortured them. I showed them In the Mood for Love. And I said, watch this film 20 times and see there is such little movement and such little acting, but everything is so precise. And later on, after they got used to the style, they were very happy, because, you know, it's also a trick in a way to not, otherwise it would have taken 10 years to make the film, you know, if we had done it really fluid. So it is a trick in a way to reduce movement, to bracket it with stillness, and to make it expressive. This is something I have used all the time in my films, simply because I make it myself. So you learn to take a restriction and make and take advantage of it. But it took then 3 months, and some of them more, to, you know, reduce movement and bring it down to a few number of drawings, simply because the person who was coloring the drawings could not color, you know, 1200 frames in a scene. It had to be brought down to 500 or 600. So we would bring down the action in such a way that only the essential shows, and then paint it very beautifully. And then for me, it's like this: the economy is in the mass production, but the economy is not in the idea, not in the way you conceive something. At that point, you conceive everything. But when it comes down to the mechanics of making the film, the animation, you bring down the mechanics. You do more beautiful drawings and fewer. So I have animated on these, and it does look staccato. That is also something that people are not going to be very comfortable with in the beginning, used to seeing very fluid animation. But I think after 5 or 10 minutes into the film, they kind of get used to the style, and it doesn't matter anymore. This I'm talking about people who are not initiated to animation. People who are initiated to animation know this, know that it is going to be style.
Right, right. Well, it's beautiful. You know, one other thing that I really observe is music plays a big part of the film. And it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on the music and how it was structured, and then working with the composer and the musicians.
Okay, so we didn't, yes, music is a big part, but we did not have a single composer for the entire film. And there's a reason for this. For me, music is something that is, of course, very important, and it kind of gives me the rhythm of making a film. So right at the beginning, when I did the animatics, I did the animatics myself completely. It took me about more than a year.
Wow.
But when I was, yeah, that's important, because it's kind of a mood board. It has everything in it when I can sit alone and do it, and then giving that to a team to execute. it becomes easier because we can keep coming back to a strong storyboard, which I could not do if someone else was doing the storyboard. So when I do the storyboard, and of course it's more than a year, I am always laying it down on a timeline and using music and some stray dialogues here and there, because it gets into minutes and minutes and you can't really watch it or even edit it without a rhythm. So I keep using music. And when I made this animatic, I used a lot of music which set the pitch, set the tone, gave the mood, the music that I liked. And there was also this Caetano Veloso's Cucuru Cucu Paloma, a Spanish song, which I loved, and it just set the mood. So I laid it down in my animatics, and I said, okay, this is it. This is where we will make the film, and slowly we will get the music going. And everybody fell in love with all the existing music that I had used, and it worked so well that the producers tried really hard to get the rights of the music, the archival music which I had used, because after a while it just worked so well with the film. So most of the music in the film is music which exists in the 1950s, 60s. These are film music. Everybody in India is very familiar with them. And the same with a Spanish song. Nobody knows that Spanish song, but I felt it just worked and we got the rights. And there's only one song we composed, which was the song which the girl sings all the time about the river in her mind. And this, I knew right from the beginning that my protagonist is not going to be much of a talker, but she has a lot of thoughts. So she's going to be singing. So that was the only one right from the beginning was composed as her inner thoughts. And of course, I got a singer, an absolutely amazing singer to give the voice for the main character. And she would start humming and singing. And we just recorded a lot of things that she did and put it into the film. So again, it's very unconventional. I did not want this strong background score, which is usually the thing which is done in an animation film, to take it forward. Again, I wanted it to be chaotic like a city. What happens in a city like Bombay is, if you step out of the house, there is a music playing in the lift. Then you get into a taxi. The taxi cab has his own music that is playing. Then you come out of that, and there is a few blaring restaurants or shops which have put this music. Then you enter your office. In your office, your colleagues have put on some music in the morning and some in the afternoon. And then when you go back, it continues. So you are listening to other people's music all the time. We are a very noisy culture. So this is the feeling also that I wanted in the film, that it's not your Eric Satie which is going to play because everything is so beautiful. You can't hear Eric Satie in Bombay. You will hear what the rickshaw has put on, or this TV stall. So again, the noise, the music and everything comes from the space, is justified from coming from the space. And then at some point, it just works with the mood so well that I kind of use it. So even the Spanish song, if you wondered where it's coming from the gramophone of the old lady who, being a lesbian, would be very fond of Caetano Veloso. So yes, many, many, many stories and connections. And that's why it's playing there. But it was heard on the street when a tragic death had to happen. So it's like that.
Well,
and of course, I had a wonderful sound designer. I work very closely with my sound designer he's made music out of sounds. Like there are times in the chaos of Bombay, which is very chaotic, he suddenly uses a chopper sound, and the chopper makes it sound like this guy's heartbeat, the anxiety going up and stuff. So the sound design, the music has actually made the animation look so much more effective.
Well, it really supports the animation very well. And that's why I brought up the music, because I wasn't aware that those were songs that
existing.
But I did love the music for the girl. And I did notice that the sound design supported the film without drawing attention to itself. It did help carry the story and convey it, but it wasn't overdone. I felt the music more than the sound, I think, overall. It really carried the flow of it, which was so nice, I thought.
Yeah, I'm also fond of the form of Indian filmmaking is very musical. And not Bollywood. Bollywood is only Hindi cinema. We have cinema from all different languages in India. And the music has been always very heavy. Music is something that we remember music from 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. as in this age, so do 20-year-olds and so do the 80-year-olds. So it's something that connects people a lot, the same songs over the years connect people. We don't have, we have a very strong culture of film music. We don't really have, like you have, of music outside of the realm of the film. All Indian music is either classical music or it is film music from the language that you. So people grow up hearing these songs and they remember it for years and years. So the recall value is very. Again, this is a layer which Indians will understand much more. But I feel just the quality of the voices, just that music, as a person like you reacting to, it's supposed to make you feel upbeat. And I mean, that's cinema for me. It is filled with a lot of things. But when it comes to the touching emotional side, you take everything away and you give it very quietly to the audience.
So one thing I'm really curious about, there are not that many women film directors in the animation world. There are a few more coming along, but it is still, it's not, it's not the majority, that's for sure. And in India, are you unique in a film director in India? Are there many women doing this?
We have a very unique circumstance, which is animation is a very young industry. A part of it, which is the outsource industry, is the one with the money and the power, and that is full of men. Right. However, the independent animation industry actually is led by 3 or 4 women and directors, really? Much more than men. So we had a film last year, 2013, which was in Toronto, made by a woman. She's been my mentor, and I've worked with her. And it's funny because it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of patience, and there's very little money. So right now, there are a lot of women in doing animation as does, like at my level, trying to make animation films. And what I have tried to make is very difficult. Even if I was a man, I would be finding the same difficulties because of the topic, because of the unconventionality, the non-children's filmmaking zone that I'm getting into. So that was problematic, whether I was a man or a woman. So it's difficult for me to compare. Also, another thing is, everywhere that I have worked, women get paid equally because these are new, young studios made by people like us, like people who have wanted to make a difference. So I'm talking about the situation which is really nice and probably very small, where it didn't matter whether I was a woman or a man. And I had 38% of the staff, coincidentally, in Bombay Rose are women. And this was not intentional, it happened. And women on very strong positions, like my main producer, executive producers were 2 women. My production designer is a woman. My main animator was a woman. The lead people. So these are women in very important positions also. It just so happens that they've been working on animation for so long that those are the people that I knew, and we just got together and formed the dream team that we wanted to. So I think animation in India has a lot of women, and it needs to continue. It needs to be made. We need to make sure that it remains like this. I'm worried that when it gets really big, that's where the politics start. And there are studios where women can't. Animation studios. My colleagues have worked in these big studios where it's difficult for them to rise on top. And my whole argument is, give up on those big corporate studios. Start smaller ones. Start ones where you can envision the future of the studio, where it will be conducive for women to work.
Right.
So through entrepreneurship, bring about the change. And I think the change is there at a very small level in the few boutique studios that we are working in. So I couldn't complain about any distinction at all. In fact, I think we were so many women, the men were a little scared because we'd be fighting a lot. And we'd be fighting so much, and they could never figure out that the next day you're back and working and saying, oh, is your son okay? Is your cat okay? That's very passionate because a bunch of women were working. But that's how the film got made, because we never gave up.
Well, it shows, because it's a beautiful effort, and I can see it's a huge amount of work. The different painterly styles and the characterization. I think we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you, what's next for you? Do you have another project underway? What are your plans?
I have just finished making a short film during the pandemic. Not finished; it's going to be about 2 more weeks. But that was just because I was not able to think in a very inspiring way. So I kept myself busy making an animation film. But yes, I am now ready with my next feature film, and it's about 9 cats and their 9 lives,
Oh,
and it's just at the at an idea level, and it's going to be a fun film, like enough a tragic film. So I'm going to make one fun film with women and cats. So that's the project. But I have to, I mean, this time I'm going to get a script writer, because I think I am better at visualizing and animating the film, and I don't enjoy the process of scripting as much as of making. So
yes.
I'm getting 2 women who are going to write the script for film. So yes, we should be ready with that, and let's see how it goes. I hope it is easier to find finance for the next one compared to this one. But yeah, so the process is on. Of course, it could either be a feature or a series, depending on how it uh, works out. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, there is that in the plan.
No end of creative endeavors for you, I can see. Busy, busy. Lots of, I'm sure you have so many creative ideas, and it's wonderful to have Bombay Rose and having you as part of the animation community and the work you're doing. I'm sure there are many, many great things to come.
I hope so. Let's see. But yes, I'm quite excited to see how people respond to the film next month. So that's going to be. I'm a little tense and anxious, because finally this is the first. I mean, honestly, this is the first film that is coming out to such a big audience. So let's see how it goes. And I'm kind of not getting too deep into my next film, because then what happens is I don't want to do interviews. I don't want to talk to people. I want to get into my shell and make my film. So everybody's telling me, don't get into your shell for a few months till the film is coming out. So I'm staying out of my shell, and here I am.
Good for you. Well, thank you so much for taking this time to speak with us today and share your thoughts and some of the inside information on the filmmaking and the story. And it was really a pleasure speaking with you.
It is a pleasure. Your questions are so nice, and it's not normal that you get asked all these questions. The normal questions are, what do you think is happening to animation in India? And I'm like, so bored. I don't want to talk about that. Ask me about my film. Why is it
Right.
what it is and stuff. And everything that you asked me was deeper questions into my film. So it was such a pleasure answering you.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Well, it was a real pleasure speaking with you. And I'm very excited to see how well your film does. I think it's going to do very well. I'm very impressed by it.
Thank you. It feels so good to hear this. And as I said on the Diwali day, it's like a gift, like you just made me so happy.
Oh, nice. Well, and I think our ASIFA-Hollywood membership is going to love it, because animators and animation people who will really enjoy seeing what you've created.
I'm so glad you're helping me reach out to them, because that is really the peer group, you want to even virtually connect to.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.